To start, I will go over the main modalities of the program for Senior Clinical Investigator. So to translate basic scientific knowledge into applications that directly benefit patients or general health care, it appears that clinical scientists are actually ideally placed. From their clinical experience, they know what the system needs and what the patient needs. And because of their scientific training, they are in an ideal position to advance practice-oriented research. And indeed, a recent study by Ankart and colleagues has shown that clinical scientists are more likely to perform use-inspired research that builds on prior insights from applied literature, and moreover, their studies are more likely to trigger applied follow-up research. Unfortunately, however, although clinical scientists could be an important motor driving translational biomedical research, in practice, they are often not at liberty to engage in such endeavors because they are fully occupied in the clinic. And this is where we at FWO provide a solution by freeing funds to release clinical scientists from their clinical duties and to give them time to perform such translational research. The same study by Ankart and colleagues has demonstrated that our fellows have an increased publication rate compared to their peers, and importantly also their research focus shifts more towards a translational perspective, which can have important consequences for patients and also for the healthcare system in general. An important remark to be made here is that the Senior Clinical Investigator Fellowship is part-time only, ensuring that the fellow will also remain strongly embedded in the clinic at the same time. So the fellowship is actually quite unique in this respect. It will not be paid out to the fellows themselves, but rather to the hospital to finance their replacement. And usually this replacement grant is meant for 50% replacement, but in exceptional cases, when a fellow really cannot be spared from the clinic for the full 50%, there is also an alternative option where the fellow will be replaced for 20% and the remaining funds will be used to finance scientific or technical support staff. And typically this support staff would be, for instance, a PhD student or a lab technician, but also other options are possible. Now this 20% option should be the exception rather than the rule, and it should also be thoroughly motivated in the application. An example would be, for instance, a surgeon who performs complicated procedures that cannot be taken over by a replacement. And in this case, this should of course also be attested in writing by the head of the clinic. So who can actually apply for this fellowship? In order to be eligible to apply, you should first of all be recognized to practice your profession in Belgium as a medical specialist, a general practitioner, or alternatively as a pharmacist specializing in clinical biology. You should be employed at an academic hospital affiliated to a Flemish university, or in case you are a general practitioner, you should be employed at a Flemish University Department of Family Medicine throughout the fellowship duration. You should spend at least 80% of your activities on purely clinical duties, meaning that you're not already working as a researcher, for instance. And you should hold a PhD degree with no more than 20 years of seniority. Similar to all of our other FWO fellowships, we allow only 2 attempts to apply, but importantly, because the program underwent major revisions 2 years ago, since then this counter was reset and you can apply twice again, irrespective of any potential earlier attempts before 2020. So now let's talk a bit about the finances. So the fellowship has a duration of 5 years and it is renewable 2 times, meaning that in the best case, the fellow will have funding for a consecutive period of 15 years, which should give them time enough to build their own research line with future long-term perspectives. Since the revision of the program, the budget has increased, and now there will be a maximum of 60,000 euros per year available to finance the clinical replacement. For general practitioners, the calculation of the annual fee will be based on the wage of a part-time appointment as a lecturer at a university. And also here, the maximum amount is 60,000 per year. And then in the exceptional case of the 20% instead of 50% replacement, the remainder of the budget can be used to fund support staff. And also here, the maximum budget is 60,000 per year. What is also new since the revision of the program is that now our first-time fellows will receive a bench fee to help them start up their research. And this bench fee has a maximum of 100,000 euros over the full 5-year period, or 20,000 per year. And the same rules and regulations apply as for our other pre- and postdoctoral fellowships. So what do you need if you want to apply for this fellowship? First of all, you will need the formal commitment of both the director of the hospital and the dean of the faculty that they will provide actual clinical replacement for you. And here, actually, it's highly recommended to have the name of the person or the people who will be replacing you already in writing in the application. And then second, the director and the dean should also guarantee that you will be reinstated at the end of the fellowship. You should submit your application in English and online via the e-portal available on the FWO website. And then the application will be assessed by an international jury. This is also new since the revision of the program. We now have a fully international jury, so there are no longer any Belgian members in the jury to make sure that the evaluation process will be fair. The jury will take into account the following aspects. So first of all, the expertise of the candidates for our first-time fellows, or an evaluation of the previous period for our second or third-time fellows. Of course, they will also look at the quality and the added value of the proposed research projects. And finally, for the final renewal, we would like to see that the established research lines have a long-term perspective, meaning that the hospital has plans to continue this also after the completion of the fellowship, and preferably, of course, that the fellow will remain in the driving seat to continue this. I would also like to spend a few words specifically on the renewals, because this procedure has changed drastically since the revision, and it seems to also have stirred quite some reactions. So as opposed to earlier, when a renewal was almost certain, since the revision, there are more stringent quality requirements attached to this process. So together with their application for a renewal, the fellows will submit a progress report of their past activities, and this will be evaluated by the jury. The jury will assess, among others, the scientific output so far, the growth of the candidate as an independent researcher, the impact of their results on clinical practice, so in other words, the translational nature of their research, and then also the international recognition and collaboration of the candidates. And very importantly, in line with our other fellowship programs, there can be no second attempt in case this renewal is rejected. And here you see a graphical representation of the success rate since the revision. So each year we have funds available to grant 8 new fellowships. And based on the number of applications last round, this translates into a success rate of 44% for first-time fellows. And then out of those 8 successful fellowships, 6 can be renewed for the first time. And out of those 6 first renewals, 4 can be renewed for a second renewal period. So in order for your application to have a higher chance of making the cut, we highly recommend you to check the score grids that the jury members will use to evaluate your proposal. So these score grids contain all of the evaluation criteria, and they can be found on the Senior Clinical Investigator webpage on the FWO website. So I would suggest that you try to assess your application using this score grid, and if possible, that you also ask one of your colleagues to do the same, just to make sure that you check all of those boxes. Then I would like to draw your attention to some new aspects that are really novel since this round. So following the international trend, FWO has decided to give more attention to a variety of researcher profiles and also research outputs. So we try to move away a bit from the classical one-sided focus on output criteria such as publication rate. And now we also include additional elements that have been inserted in the application form and also have been adjusted in the score descriptors. For those of you who already have an account on the ePortal, please carefully check your bibliography, because we have made some automatic changes, but of course you as a researcher remain responsible for the content of this bibliography. In addition, we've also added a few additional questions about responsible research and innovation, including questions about gender and diversity, and also the involvement of social stakeholders. And the main purpose of the inclusion of those questions is to raise awareness among our researchers for those issues. And then, of course, there is a slide that is especially relevant for this audience, and that is about the impact of the pandemic on your past and your future research. So we would advise you to mention any aspects of how the pandemic has influenced or will influence your career in any of the relevant boxes in the application form, including career breaks, research phase, or in the project description itself. And we will ask the jury to take this into account during the evaluation of your candidacy. Then some important dates to mark down. So the call is already open since last week, and we expect your applications no later than March the 1st at 5 p.m. by the latest via the ePortal. The results will be announced on the final day of June, and we strive to provide you feedback on your application shortly thereafter in the month of July, and you will receive this feedback regardless of the outcome. So both the ones who were successful and the ones who were not successful will receive feedback. And then the fellowship will start on the 1st of October. So the successful candidates will work under the regulations for Senior Clinical Investigator, which can be found on our website. And once you're active as a fellow, in case you have not done so already, we expect a signed declaration specifying the details of your replacement. And as a Senior Clinical Investigator, you will report twice during each period of the fellowship. So once in the midterm, and then once by the end of term. And as I already indicated before, this end term report will actually be used to evaluate your renewal application. And then to conclude, here are some additional tips and tricks on how to submit a winning application. So as I already indicated, since the revision of the program, the emphasis on this call is on translational research, because this is where a clinical scientist can really make the difference. So please make sure that your topic of choice is both innovative, but also translational. As I already indicated, make sure to check your application using the score grid to make sure that you include all of the relevant evaluation criteria. And then finally, because the purpose of this fellowship is that the clinical researcher can build a research portfolio that has strong future perspectives, it is important that the hospital will also engage itself to continue where the fellow started. So please make sure that this commitment is also attested in the proposal. And then this is probably a cliche, of course, but do start in time. Make sure that you obtain all of the required signatures from the hospital director, from the dean of the faculty, and also the required attestations, for example, the certificate that you are recognized to practice your profession in Belgium. If possible, also provide the details of your clinical replacement in full, because this will give you bonus points, as you will see in the score grid. And finally, make sure that you have prepared or updated your Personalia page with special attention to the changes in the bibliography. You can find any additional information and details on our webpage, but please also don't hesitate to contact us via our email address med@fwo.be if you have any remaining questions or concerns. So with that, I would like to thank you all and good luck with your application.